being around a bunch of farm kids or something. I don't know what they were thinking, but he came in with a Metallica metal up your ass shirt and a Stratocaster, and I disrupted the entire flow of the entire school. And I thought that was the coolest thing I'd ever seen. So I'm like, I want to be like that.
So this podcast is about you and your journey in music and how you guys got to where you are now.
How did we get here?
We'll find out, hopefully. Are you both from LA? I did read the band started in Los Angeles.
The band started in Los Angeles, but I'm from outside of Philadelphia. Mark's from Elmira, New York. We went to college together in Pennsylvania. So we've been playing in bands for a really long time.
Oh, wow. Okay, cool. Yeah. I think, hang on real quick. Got more
this is Chris coming on.
Yeah, Chris is here. Hey, Chris.
How's it going?
Awesome. Yeah, I was just telling Mark and Alex that this podcast is about you guys and your journey in music. I'm Adam, by the way. Nice to meet you all.
Good to see you, Adam.
Good to see you. Cool. So the band started in LA. Alex is kind of saying. So you're from outside Philly, Alex?
Yes.
Talk to me about that a little bit.
A town called Wayne, Pennsylvania.
Okay.
It's about 20 minutes west of Philly. Nice place. We love going to Philly now because a couple radio stations in Philly play us. So it's really cool to kind of come back there. But I've been in LA since about the end of 98. So most of my adult life has been out in Los Angeles. So I really identify with being out here for such a long time.
Sure. How did you get into music?
How did I get into music?
Yeah.
Oh, there's an old story. My sister was taking piano lessons and was having trouble with it. And one day my mom hears the piano lessons being played perfectly, and she was going to go congratulate my sister. And it turns out it was me. I'm 4 years younger at like age 6, playing her lessons because I was upstairs just listening to what was supposed to be played. So I think from early on, I had sort of a knack for
like an ear for it. Sounds like it. Wow.
Being able to translate it with the fingers.
Oh my gosh. So you obviously continued with piano, I would imagine.
Well, not really. I kind of got moved over to guitar, and even then they would teach you classical music back then. And I had the guy with the footstool and like really proper technique, and I like didn't get it at all. I was in 2nd grade and hated it. So I stopped. And then I think it was when I started to hear Led Zeppelin and Jimi Hendrix and bands like that, I grabbed this little crappy classical guitar out of the basement and started trying to learn how to play, Heartbreaker and Stairway to Heaven and Purple,
sure.
But
wow.
that's
and then were you in bands in high school and throughout your early years?
Yeah, I mean, well, in high school, I was a nerd. I was like in the Glee Club, the jazz band, the Domino Club, the Blues, which was the a cappella group.
That's rad. And my son's in chorus and he's like embarrassed kind of by it. I'm like, dude, who cares?
Yeah. Well, then you go to like, there was a guy that played drums and he had like 20 cats. So that, and like you're playing with people playing rock music, playing Grateful Dead covers, things like that. So that was on the side outside of school doing all that.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Mark, how did you, where were you born and raised?
Well, real quick, Alex, what is the Domino Club? I never heard of that.
That was like for plays for the acting. Yeah, I wasn't good at it. I was always one of the townspeople. But
I was thinking you were playing dominoes, like the game, like actual domino games.
No,
I never heard about that.
Underage gambling thing. No, it was the thespian group.
Okay, underage gambling group.
Yeah, I grew up a place called Elmira, New York. It's kind of up near, I guess really the only place you may be familiar is Ithaca, New York.
Oh, yeah, I know Ithaca. I don't know. I know of it. I don't know.
Yeah, and it was like, that was the big college. We do have a college in our town, but Ithaca had like Cornell and Ithaca College and everything. And so it was a great place to go 25 minutes away and see shows because there was always bands coming through. It was a big jam band part of the country. But growing up was basically just like hand-me-downs from my brother, like Iron Maiden, Judas Priest, like all that stuff. It was a very, that's pretty much where I grew up, was like metal or Rush. Like you were into one or the other, you know?
Okay. Is that
so
what drew you to drums? Rush?
No, I mean, it was, I started playing trumpet because my brother played trumpet in like 4th, 5th grade or whatever. And then I just always thought drums were cooler. Like the kids playing drums were like the cooler people than the horn section, you know?
Okay.
And I was like, I think I just want to like try that out. And so around like 7th, 8th grade, I had this friend, Dave Piacci, who had a drum set, and we'd just hang out at his house and like come up, make up songs in the basement. And, you know, he had a guitar, his brother was a bass player. So there was just instruments around. And that was kind of like my impetus into like just wanting to be in bands, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so we started a band, and then we had this band in high school called Alter Ego, which was, you know,
nice. Pretty good name though.
Apparently there's a band called that. So I'm still in touch with one of the guys from my old high school band. And we kind of, we follow the career of this band Alter Ego and just see how they're doing.
It's your alter ego.
So, but we were doing like a lot of metal covers and stuff like that. And then I remember walking into, we had 2 record stores at the mall. One was Sam Goody, and the other.
I remember Sam Goody.
Yeah, and then there's a place called Record Town, which I don't know if that was like a national one or whatever, but
yeah, we didn't have that where I was growing up, at least. Yeah,
they always had like the slightly cooler stuff, you know. But I walked in one day, and Stevie Ray Vaughan's "The Sky Is Crying" album was playing, because they would just play like new releases and stuff, and something just hit me in the face, and because I heard that Hammond B3 in there, and just instruments I wasn't really like familiar with, because I was just listening to like a lot of heavier stuff, you know. And that just, I bought that album, brought it home. I think I played it 1,000,000 times, and switched the direction of the band from heavy. Then all of a sudden we're doing like blues covers, and that got us into like Clapton and the Beatles and like all this different stuff that we just never thought. And then that made my parents happy, because we were practicing at my house. So my mom one day was like, "Are you doing a Beatles cover? Like, thank God, you know."
Sick of the metal.
Yeah, instead of like Slayer, Raining Blood, you know.
Sure.
Like, so it was cool. And then like, yeah, we just had bands the whole time in high school. Met Alex in college. I was getting more into like jammy stuff, like Fish and the Dead around then. Because like I said, you could just go to shows all the time in Ithaca, and then around the whole sort of region. And yeah, met Al in college. We had a band. We were doing Dead covers. We had some of our own tunes or whatever. And he moved out here, and I went to Nashville, and then followed about 3 years after Nashville, I came out here as well. And
okay, so Alex, you and Mark went to college together. All 3 of you didn't go to the same college?
Yeah, just me and Mark.
Okay, did you guys both go for music or no?
No, you know, growing up on the East Coast, at least in my experience, it was very much structured towards like, you have the career to fall back on. So
right,
for me, college was, I didn't have my mind ready yet to think that I was going to do music for a living. It was more like, get your business degree, and, you know, eventually you'll put on a tie and, you know, have a house.
Right.
But it was about halfway through college, I picked up a music minor to help balance out my shitty grades on the business classes.
Sure.
I knew that I was graduating kind of for my parents, who were putting up a lot of money to put me through college, which I appreciated. So I knew kind of that music was what I wanted to end up doing. So, but it wasn't to like be a rock star or anything like that. It was like, I want to make a living at this. I don't know how, I don't know what I could possibly do, but LA, I'd never been west of Ohio before. And New York just seemed like a really unattainable, expensive place. So I just, without knowing anybody, just packed up my car, the 93 Ford Escort, and rolled into LA, and didn't know anybody. So, you know, that was that trip.
Oh, wow. Okay. And then Mark, you went to Nashville, you said?
I did. I had a friend who was in college down there, and he said, you know, it's pretty fun down here. And at that time, it wasn't like the whole world was moving to Nashville.
I just moved to Nashville. It's so funny you said that, from Southern California. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was like you would go down Broadway and all those places now that are all like the bachelorette and bachelor parties and the pedal pubs. None of that was, it was all like every little
tonks.
All the honky tonks, but there was a bluegrass one. There was a kind of like rockabilly bar. There was,
oh, cool.
It was great. And like, so I tried to play down there, but also at that time it was more studio musician focused, if that makes sense. It wasn't go start your own band. And I'm just not a chops guy. Like there's just way better people at that than me. So I just ended up working in just taking a job at BMI, which is like a
publishing
songwriting society thing, and just started learning about the business side of it. And then eventually, I don't know, I think I called Alex for some reason, or we were emailing or something. He's like, dude, my roommate just moved. And I'm like, I'll be there in 2 weeks, man. And I just
just left and went to LA.
I drove my I had gotten rid of my Ford Escort. I had a 95 Jetta, so that was my my whip to get out.
That's awesome. Okay, Chris, so I want to hear your story. So where were you born and raised?
I was born I was born in a hospital in Kenosha, but because I always say I was born on a dairy farm. It makes it sound like I was like, you know, I wasn't born on the farm, but I was raised there.
Raised on the farm. Okay.
I was raised,
born in the barn.
I wasn't born in a barn. But I was raised on a dairy farm with my two brothers, Mark and Brian. Mom was a nurse. Dad's a dairy farmer. They still are farming. They're still going.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was an interesting way to grow up. I didn't know it at the time that it was an interesting way to grow up, but now I do, because I live in Los Angeles and I've lived in Milwaukee and I've had all those experiences. And so we were a musical household. There was always records playing. Dad always had music playing out in the barn. He had music playing. We had a cab tractor that I used to ride around with him when I was just a little guy. And kind of similar to Alex's story, they bought me a wiffle ball bat when I was in diapers, because there's footage of me safely tucked away of me at probably a year and a half, 2 years old, holding onto a couch and holding the bat. And Mom said all I would do is she'd put on a record and I would pretend the bat was a microphone. Now, how I even knew what a microphone was, and I'd dance and pretend to be the singer. So I had a love of music from the beginning, and it was kind of a little bit of an out. I always got along with people, but as far as like my interests, I was kind of, as a kid, like searching for that thing, you know.
Mm-hmm.
There weren't any musician kids around. So it didn't even seem like something that you could do. It seemed like something that people out there in the world did, but people where I was from, I didn't really see a lot of that. And then there was a little like softball tournament when I was in like the 5th grade, and they had some junky cover band in there, and I just thought that was the coolest thing I'd ever seen. So that kind of started me thinking about playing. And then in 6th grade or 5th grade, a kid came to school with a Strat, and he had just moved to town. I had 4 kids in my class, by the way. So this kid was like, that was like the way it was from 1st through 4th grade. And then in 5th grade, like a couple other kids came in. And so I think we were up to a massive amount of like 6-7 children in the same grade.
So
and one of them was like this kind of bad guy, meaning like cool guy from, he got kicked out of the public school. So they sent him over thinking that he would do well being around a bunch of farm kids or something. I don't know what they were thinking, but he came in with a Metallica metal up your ass shirt and a Stratocaster, and I disrupted the entire flow of the entire school. And I thought that was the coolest thing I'd ever seen. So I'm like, I want to be like that. And got a guitar eventually, and started playing it, and got in a band in high school. My brother was a drummer. He had been playing drums for a while. He was kind of like just always had that passion for music. I was asking to get a guitar for a long time, but I don't think anybody really thought I was that serious about it. I was never insistent about it. It was never like, please, please. I wasn't that kind of person. I still am not that kind of person. So I might have said like, I'd like a guitar. And they're like, okay, someday. And then maybe down the road, I'm like, I'd like a guitar. Well, they got me one for my 8th grade graduation.
Oh, cool. Okay.
And I went to the public high school in Burlington, Wisconsin, which had, by the measure of what I had experienced, they had 100 and some odd kids in my class. And I'm like, wow, all right. And I met a few kids that played guitar and ended up forming a band my sophomore year and started playing gigs in the gym. And then we made a demo and it got actually on Milwaukee radio. So we thought we were the coolest people ever.
That's huge. How did the radio station find it?
I had an in. My English teacher was also in our broadcasting teacher. He ran at our high school, Burlington High School. They had and they still have one of the only true working radio stations in Wisconsin. That's a high school station. So you can take broadcasting and all that in high school and learn how to be a DJ. So
that's so awesome.
So I took that class, and that teacher, Terry, he had a show in Milwaukee on Saturday nights called Radio Chaos, where he played indie and alternative rock. And it was kind of like the only show playing some of that stuff at the time. And he played us on there. So that led to some gigs in Milwaukee, which was extremely thrilling. I mean, when you're packing up from playing in your garage with the door open and nothing, seeing your band except for like a pasture of cattle that are like kind of over there to going into Milwaukee and playing gigs was really awesome. And then went to college in UW Milwaukee, basically as an agreement to my mom. I wanted to once I caught the bug, I was like, when I was 14 years old, I strummed the guitar and I was like, this is what I'm gonna do. I didn't know how, I didn't know where, I didn't know if I was good enough, but I was like, this is what I'm going to do. This is my dream right now. And that never left me since. That was the calling right there. So when I got to UW Milwaukee, I went there because my folks were like, you got decent grades, get a fallback plan. And I was like, I don't need a fallback plan. I'm going to play music. You're a kid, you don't know. So
right. Yeah.
I didn't know how absurdly insane it was to even think that you could make any kind of living playing original music, which was my goal. And formed a band in Milwaukee. It did pretty good actually for a while. It was called Freshwater Collins. And we wondered why people thought we were a jam band. We were actually not a jam band. We were like a rock band that played like funky rock and roll songs, and kind of in the model of bluesy, like an Allman Brothers kind of thing, but not with the jam. It was more like inspired by Zeppelin and stuff. And my favorite singers were always soul singers like Ray Charles, Sam Cooke, all that stuff. So that's where my real love of singing came from. And I accidentally became the singer in high school because when we went to do that demo I had talked about, the other guy heard his voice on tape and was like, I can't sing. You're going to have to be the singer. And I at that day, I became the singer and I never stopped being a singer since. So
that's amazing.
That's kind of, and then I moved to Los Angeles and from Milwaukee with my wife, Valerie. She got a job at the LA Times. And I was like, I'm not going to stand in the way of an opportunity like that. And when I got here, I just was like, hey, it's time to, I'm here. I never thought I'd be here. So here I am, and I might as well give it the best shot I could, and ended up meeting Alex and Mark, and they were coming out of a different project. So it took a little time. We got to know each other, bonded over records, and eventually we jammed and we recorded that first session. And that's where this story starts with the three of us. That first day we played together, we formed the band. We just were like, this is the band. So.
And that's when you guys played in the living room at the apartment or the house in Los Feliz?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So that was your first, jam together and you recorded it?
Yes. Yeah. It's actually one of the songs. It's called Born Unnamed because actually that was the name of the song. But when we recorded it, we didn't have a name for the group either. We weren't even a group. We were just three guys. And like, I didn't even know when I first met Alex and Mark that they played bass and guitar. When I first met Alex, I was like, wow, you're a really good guitar player. And Mark was a really, really talented, keyboardist. So I had it in my head.
But you weren't even playing drums, Mark. You were playing
that time,
piano or keyboard. Wow.
And then I played in it. We talked about getting together, and then I kind of, I put it in, it's the same thing I did with my wife. Everybody that I've ever, and everything that I've ever had in my life that's really stuck around and been a big part of it is always kind of taking a little work to get it going, So like, remember the first time I asked my wife out, she said, I don't know, I can't, you're a musician, and I've kind of been down that road. And I'm like, how can you blame her? But in the back of my head, I'm like, all right, we'll just become friends. And then a month in, we're dating, and the same thing with Alex and Mark. I was like, basically got turned away from the idea of a band, and I can't blame them, because when I didn't know what they'd just taken a pretty seriously hard run at going out there and doing it, and did, with their former band. Mm-hmm. So they were pretty kind of done with it, and I was just getting there with this new energy. I'm like, let's do it. And they're like, So in my head, I was like, how do I get these two guys who are clearly, like, out of everybody I'd met out here, the most like me, the guys I like the most, and they're probably two of the more talented people I've met out here. I'm like, how am I going to get them in a band? So I just slowly found projects to play with them. Mark was playing drums in another project, and I'm like, do you need a lap steel and pedal steel player? Yeah, sure. So I ended up doing that. Or Alex, I hired Alex to play bass on a few gigs. I was playing in a terrible band I was in at the time that wasn't really cutting it. But Alex was like, oh yeah, I'll play. I'm looking to play a little bass. And that kind of brought it all together when, and we formed the band that first day.
Wow. Okay. So then you record this session that you guys are doing. And then from there, what do you do with it? You're like, okay, now we have these songs. We're kind of a band. We just, did this little recording thing. And like, where do you take it?
I think all of us were at that point in our lives where we were like, starting another band, we have to like take all of the mistakes we've made in the past that didn't work, reason why bands fizzled out in the past, and go at this really seriously. And, why is this song not good enough yet? What can we do to make it better? We really like just met at my house religiously, 4 or 5 times a week at, noon or 1, and just put a lot of time and effort into writing songs, so we maybe had about 5 songs, and I just started writing, like ninja emailing people at labels, radio stations, like whatever. And there was a guy in Philly, Bruce Warren at XPN, I just wrote him a cold email, and he was like, hey, I like this. I'm going to make it the song of the day. And these were just songs we made in our living room with, we crafted them fairly well, but they were made with very cheap equipment, played live, really, really like organic, bare bones kind of stuff. But we started to get a few gigs, and it was just like, oh, we need more songs to keep playing these shows. So we were like, we knew kind of how we wanted to do it, things we did in the past, which failed. We said, let's avoid those. And we just kind of kept going, and it just was like a slow road up a slow hill, and we're still on that slow road up the slow hill, but it's always felt like it's going upwards, even in the beginning days.
Was there something special about like that first meeting with you guys? Because it sounds like you Alex, you and Mark were in a band, and you really, from what Chris was saying, you guys were really going for it, and then it didn't do what you guys wanted it to do, and then you're kind of defeated in a sense, like with this band situation. And then you meet Chris, and you guys do this session at your house, and then it's like, oh, I'm gonna start emailing people. Like, was there just like a different energy in the room that made you kind of have that spark again, or was it Chris's new enthusiasm to bring it into the band? Or
it sounded like something, and I say that because anytime I've ever like hung a mic up at another band rehearsal, or you just hear it. It just sounds like a big muffle sound. And Chris's voice really just shot through the mix, you know. And it just sounded like again, like I said, it sounded like something. And I feel like all of our experiences leading to that point, we kind of knew right away that this was worth really diving into hard, you know.
Yeah, I mean,
those lockout spaces where you hear all the bands rehearsing.
Yeah,
It just sounds like you hear a crash cymbal, you hear a muffled voice, like, and then there's maybe like one band where even just rehearsing, you can tell that something's happening. That's what it felt like here, you know, and that was like a first probably for all of us.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, like, aside from the band we had previously, you know, which was 5-6 years, and now we're 10 years next month in this band.
Wow.
Up to that point, I had never really, I mean, I echo what Chris said, where it's like, you knew you wanted to do this even as a kid, but no idea like how to do it, right? Or even our college band, we're like, it's fun. Here's a gig for 4 hours at the one bar in town. Just go play and all your friends come and everybody just drinks, and it doesn't matter if you're terrible or good or whatever. But I think we decided, okay, if we're going to do this, we're not 20, right? So this is it. And we had amassed some knowledge of like how to go about it, you know, like Al was saying with the ninja emails, info@subpop. All right, that got returned. How about info, you know, whatever it is. And we just went on a tear of like all of that, because this was the last time, you know. I think any of us in our right minds would say, okay, we're going to start a band one last time. Let's just make sure we do it properly.
Your last hurrah type of,
Kind of, yeah. I mean, not to over dramatize it, but it was kind of that. And it was sort of like, you know, what we had learned, both good and bad, over the years of just being out here, trying to, you know, having bands and stuff like that, all really fed into going about this the right way. But it really came down to, wow, this dude can sing his ass off, and it'd be a shame if we didn't give it a whirl, you know what I mean? And yeah, that was the bottom line on the whole thing.
Sure. Know? Wow. And how quickly did you guys get the attention of Concord Records? Because you put out your first album a few years after the band had formed.
We got attention from them right off the bat, but we didn't really get a serious look till a few years in, like four years in or so. And then they saw us play at the Fox in Denver, opening for Brian Setzer. And
oh wow,
excuse me, Detroit, yeah, Detroit in and it was just at that time where people were still buying like a lot of compact discs. So this would be what, 6 years ago or whatever. It still was there, you know, people still had the CD player in their car and their computer and their everything. And it hadn't quite gone over that hill yet where it is now, where it's like everything is pretty much online, and most people go that way, or vinyl even. But we had two discs out, and the merch person who, happy story there, the person, Lisa, who taught us everything we know about merch at a show, she took us on, she was Brian's merch person, and she kind of took us under her wing, and she's like, we had our disc priced at $5. She's like, that's ridiculous, price them at 10. And we're like, that's too much. And she's like, no, it's not. And the night we were in Detroit, we had kind of gotten to the point where we had it down to a science, where after our set, I just was like, hey, we're going to go into the back and we're going to be there with our albums. If you liked what you heard, we'll be there hanging out. Come on over, say hello. So what had started happening was we would get we'd sell like 100 to 200 discs a night. And that night in Detroit, it just, the Fox had like this really old fashioned system, which was super cool, kind of rad. But it was the only time it happened this way on the whole tour. And it just happened to be the night the guys from the label were there. They had like it roped off, like looked like how you would stand in a line at Disney World. And we're looking at this thing, we're walking in, we're like, that's kind of weird. That's a little odd. Well, luckily that night, I mean, I don't know, we connected really hard with the crowd. And the line to get our disc looked like a ride at Six Flags.
Wow.
You know, it was like we sold 200 some odd discs or more that night, and we're there for a long time. So these guys were waiting to talk to us. And I think I have to assume that had to help our cause with them, where they're like, wait a minute, you know, this opening band just got a standing ovation from a crowd that doesn't know them. And this, you know, so that was, we at that point just had these songs so honed that we just kind of knew how to do it at that point with those songs, you know, and those were the songs that inevitably became our first album, Give It Back to You, you know. So there you go. That was kind of it. Funny part is, on Give It Back to You, the song that ended up being the biggest song on that record was one of the last songs we wrote for that record. And none of us even, I don't think any of us even thought anything of that song when we did it, which was called Off the Ground. And when the label, we didn't know anything about the radio or anything like that. And the label's like, this is your single. And we're like, okay. We're like, single, you know. But yeah, I mean, we were to go back because to the early thing, because I know that's what this is about. From my side, I just knew at that moment, when I see something that I know, it's a calling from within. And that first day, I was like, that sounds like a band, don't you guys think? And everybody's like, yeah. And I'm like, let's do this, you know. And we're the kind of guys that once we commit to something, we really go at it, you know. So that was how it happened. And none of us had, and then, you know, you make that recording that day, and then a couple of weeks later, you're getting played on the radio and being asked to do residencies and all these things that we had never experienced before. So you're like getting vindicated that you're not insane too. You know, it's like, oh, we think this is good. We didn't know on that day if anybody would ever even want to listen to it. But eventually, you know, it just kind of showed us, hey, this might be a little bit of a different thing. Maybe when the three of us play, it's different than when we've played with other people, you know, because I'd been singing for years. And so, and I had never gotten where I wanted to be, professionally speaking. So I don't know why, when the three of us got together, it all locked up, but it did. So kind of like love at first sound. You know what I mean?
I like that. So. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, obviously Off the Ground was the right choice. It was like the #1 song, right? On Billboard, you had a #1 song with AAA, which is crazy. A Grammy nomination. I mean, all these things, it sounds like once you know, that song really kind of exploded on as far as that went from that record.
Yeah, I don't know how that happened. I mean, it was funny. We had this some people will when you're in this as being a songwriting thing, they'll be like, oh, you wrote this song to be a radio song. And it's like, dude, I was playing a lap steel and the bass player is playing a slide on his bass. That is not, there's no formula that I've ever seen that says that's going to work, you know, in that way. So it's like the idea that we were like sitting around going like, how do we write a radio song? It's like, that was not it. We just decided, and Alex trumpeted this from day one. He was like, I've played in a ton of bands, and all I want now is to be in a band that has a chorus in their songs. You know, I just want choruses. So that's all I ask. Let's write some choruses. And I'm like, and I had neither, you know? So it was like the three of us getting together. That was just kind of the thing. We're like, let's write songs that have structure, that have choruses, that are
chord changes.
Yeah. Chord changes and stuff like and don't have like 19-minute jams in the middle of a record until maybe we have a right to do that. Like, let's make concise songwriting, you know. And that's been our mantra all the way through this record. It's always been songs. It's about how to be better writers, how to be better, and then performing's always just come kind of, we all had so much experience at that, we just fit together really well. So that's never been an issue as far as like how to perform them, you know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. And what would you say, like, I know you have another record after that one, All This Life. What would you say like a big milestone from that was, or a takeaway from putting out that record would be?
I mean, I would say that I think the songwriting still was the focus. That was a little trickier one because the first album did pretty well and got us on the road for, I mean, I think we toured that record for over 2 years, you know what I mean? And just kept going back and back to the same places and saw an audience.
You had
growing
like, you got on TV, you guys did a lot. Obviously the Grammy nomination. I mean, there's a lot to come with that first album and a lot of successes. Yeah,
I mean, like we had never done a late night show and all of a sudden we're at Conan,
Right.
How do we do this? Like, how do I do this without throwing up on meth?
Right.
You just like learn how to do that stuff. But so in between all of that going on, and then you're doing festivals and all this, it was like, oh, it's been a while. We should really start thinking about a second album. And so it's a little tougher to like cram in songwriting on a weekend or, on Monday through Wednesday when you're home, and then you're gone Thursday through Sunday for 6 months or something like that. Same with videos and all that. But I mean, we put that record out, the song Life to Fix, that was another #1. So that felt really good. You just never know. I mean, it's not like you come to expect things, I don't know how other people feel, but it's kind of like, you don't put it out and go, oh, well, once that song goes #1, that, it's like, no, there's no guarantee. Like this thing's really tough. And like, you look at the other artists on those that are putting out records and everything, and it's like, there's some really, really good stuff happening. And it's just cool to be sort of associated with that. But there's no guarantee that like you're going to come out on top, and you just kind of do what you do. And I mean, there's some great musical moments on that record. I think some of it came from the feeling of like, we have to get this done. And sometimes that anxiety or whatever can give you these like impromptu cool moments, and there's definitely some of that on that record.
I wanted to pitch something to Alex here that I've never said publicly or privately, because I think it's really a big thing and it needs to get out there. But one of the things that made our band work is that we all have a lot of respect for each other's abilities. And like where Mark is really talented in one area, I might be deficient in that same area, or where I'm really talented in one area, maybe Alex and Mark don't have it. We're fortunate in this band with Al he produced that first record, he mixed that first record, and Alex always has been the one when we go into our next record. Mark and I are pretty easygoing when it comes to that. Alex is very focused. It's kind of like that. And you telling that story about the piano kind of got me thinking about that, Alex, because, a lot of our most successful material, almost all of it, has come from an idea that came out of Alex first, and I think that's really an important thing. And that's what you do. If, by the way, anybody in a band who's watching it, when you've got people that do good stuff in your band, tell them and tell others, because that's how you love each other, and that's how you stay a band for 10 years. But I just kind of, Alex, I wanted to throw it to you because that second record, like Life to Fix, and coming in to play loud, Alex was the one who was like, dude, he had the sounds, he had the vision, kind of in his head, and he sold us on it. And like, now I'm not saying he's like, a guy that goes over here is the mad genius that makes everything go, and we're just sitting there like, oh, good, whatever you want. That's not how it goes. But there's no doubt about it that the dude leads when it comes to the music and the ideas. And when we need an idea or we need to solve a problem, he's there. So Al, on that second record, Life to Fix, our most successful songs have started with your bass lines, and you've written some of our chorus melodies a lot of them are all you, like I'd love to say as the singer that I have a knack for that. I have a knack for singing well. Writing verses, I can do that all day, but when it comes to writing the hook, that's not my deal. So what do you think, Al? You got anything you want to say about all that? And I hope you appreciate how much I love you, because I wanted you to hear this in a public forum, because I think it's important that it gets out there, especially on a songwriting broadcast,
I love that.
Yeah.
The one thing I would sort of add was just when we did get picked up by Concord, the first thought was, oh, I guess we'll go record this all for real, in a studio. And they pretty much were like, no, we just like what what you did. And I honestly, I called it sort of the de facto producing role, where, because it was at my house, it was like the gear I knew, I put the mics out and mixed it. And, you know, I had experience prior to that, but I wasn't any kind of, you know, pro level, high end demand person for that. The second record, it was, you know, done under a little more duress, just like a little less time. But when we, you know, on the production front, we said, you know, let's do the drums at another studio. We can, Concord can shoot a little money that way. You know? So the production level is up a little bit, you know, but we knew we got to kind of continue this thing that we're building on here. Whereas the new record, Play Loud, we kind of decided to flip all of that on its head. It's like I wanted to take myself purposely out of a head producer role or anything like that. And, you know, we've had those same sounds, those same amps, the living room, the piano that's in the living room. It's like, we've done all of that before. We've and done covers and EPs and rarities albums, not just the 2 records. So it was about how to change it all up. You know, as far as like why I might come up with a hook or a riff, I mean, I have a process. I mean, I really do, that I stick to, which is I just like kind of keep it on all the time. And if something falls out into the sky, I didn't used to do this, but I do now, which is I make sure I either play it into a recorder or I write it down. And, you know, and what ends up happening is when you have time when it becomes time to kind of organize ideas, you've got 27 pages in your notepad of mostly nonsense, but in there are seedlings of what becomes hooks to a lot of the stuff. I got this live to fix, you know, things like that. And the same thing on the riff front, you know, it's always being aware to catch something when it lands. I got guitars all over this house and I'll just wank on blues riffs all the time. Nothing productive happens. But some days it might be a weird thing in the weather, or I might go to a different place and I'll play one thing and I'll go, whoa, that sounds like something there, you know. But it's making sure you lock it down, whether you record it on your computer, your phone, or voice, a cassette, whatever it is. So that's what I do, is I stockpile ideas lyrically and musically, and I'm pretty religiously, as just like a way of life. And when it comes down to like, all right, now I like this riff, scroll through the notes. Is there something lyrically that might work there? And I'll, you know, and sometimes it's trial and error. But you know, that's definitely like kind of why some of those initial ideas might start from me, but then it fully becomes a collaboration, because at the end of the day, like if it was only me, you'd have albums that sound like Beck or Fish, you know. Like, the stamp of what we all do wouldn't be there. So it's, you know, it's a lyric and a melody, but then it's got to go to a different place where you've got your mates all putting in and making it something bigger and better, you know. So
you mentioned with the new record, I want to talk to you about Play Loud. That comes out tomorrow, correct?
Yeah.
And you said that everything kind of got flipped on its head when it came to recording this record. And would you tell me a little bit about that? And was it affected because of, you know, now we're in this lockdown and you probably had to approach the record differently, I would imagine, as well.
Yeah, I mean, we had more time to write, which was great, and we were open to any and anything. So producing, we were meeting some different producers. It got floated to us, hey, we know somebody that would love to work with you on maybe collaborate on a song. And we said, where in the past we'd say, oh no, we don't do that. This time we were like, let's try it. Like, why not, you know? But we made demos for this whole record at my house, the same as we always do. That they do exist, and some of them are pretty good. Some of them are in varying degrees of where the song ended up. But it was those demos that also helped you know, Concord wanted to hear some music before, you know, going, all right, do we launch this from a band that did it all themselves to like to a producer that, you know, is, you know, has quite a
track record behind him.
Track record, but also it's not free to get those people.
Oh, right, sure.
So that was a first for us too. Like,
yeah,
everything had pretty much been made for very little money. So, you know, so we had these demos, but then going to Dave Sardy's house was just a whole nother experience. Here's a guy who has made 200 records plus a whole house full of gear. So we're not just using the same. I mean, I have some nice guitars. I didn't even really want to bring them. I wanted to use, what do you have there? You know, what do you have different? So yeah, and the pandemic was really just, it was like full on vintage COVID. Like the lockdowns had just started. And so we were all like in masks in the studio the whole time. There's pictures in videos, and we're wearing masks the whole time. You know, it was April of 2020, but he has his process, you know, and it was just great. I was ready to learn. I think all of us were, but me in particular, who had to do the producing, the mixing, all that stuff. Now I could just watch someone who has more experience than me and just soak it all in as much as possible, you know, and how he makes a record, you know. So it was great. It's really a thrill to do what we did over there.
Were you guys working on this record before COVID happened, or was this something that just came out? Oh, okay. I didn't know if it was something that came out of it.
Yeah, no, COVID definitely altered some of the things we did, how we did them, change, you know, even took songs that had one meaning to us before, and you didn't even have to change a word. And it's like, suddenly this song might mean something completely different. Like when you're talking about being alone or being, all of a sudden it was much more stark. So it's like, we knew that. And it was like, and if it felt good to lean into that, we did. We were writing lyrics all the way to the last day that I cut the last vocal. And that there was a pressure cooker situation where it's like, nobody knew. It was really interesting, and it was nerve-wracking, thrilling, all of the spectrum. It was because, for one thing, he's made 200 records, but as Dave said, this is the first record I'm making during COVID. So once the protocols came out and it was like, okay, you guys can work now, but you have to have only you guys, and you have to have masks on. And if somebody, you got to remember, this is a year ago. So it's like, if you touch a guitar, that's your guitar. If I touch it, it's like,
right. Nobody knew what was happening at that point.
Yeah. So we're like, holy smokes, you know, this is crazy, you know, and it's like, if I, you know, it's like, did you touch that guitar? Okay, that's yours now. This is my, you know, this is mine. And if you want to use it, like, you know, rub it down, you know, with some
spray with Lysol,
you know, yeah, you know, that was all nuts to walk around a studio and be like, okay, there's 3 of us in this room, 2 of us got to go, or 1 of us has got to go. It was like, there were all that stuff going on. But then there was also so much other stuff that wasn't going on, because our entire lives had been just disintegrated, just like everybody else's, where it's like, other than going to the studio and doing the record, there was nothing else to focus on. So that made it really an excellent, like, elevated process of writing and everything that we did. You know, we wanted to expand the sound. We wanted to grow. We wanted to try new things. We wanted all of that. And I had personally, like, on our first 2 records, every take I do, now there are songs on this album that were like one take. Every take I do on the old records would be like, take, like, Off the Ground, perfect example. I did a take, I did another take, and that's what it was, you know? And with this record, it was like, there'd be, I remember one of the first songs we did was a song called Lady Lila, and I hit it in like 2 takes. And Dave's like, sounds great, you're good. And I was there at that point, I think it was by myself, or the guys were wandering around the area. I'm like, oh, this is going to be a breeze. And then there were songs where he's just like pushing me really hard, like, because he wasn't thinking I was getting to where I needed to be. And that was awesome for me as a singer, to be in a situation where you've got somebody really pushing you. But it also was extremely nerve-wracking, because I've never been in a situation where it's like, oh no, we're switching words. You know, we're getting granular on melody here. Like, it's like, I just usually would just, in a verse, do whatever the hell I wanted. And then in the chorus, I pretty much do it. And it got to the point where it was like, we got to see what it felt like to be like, oh, you know what? If you sing that note just a little more that way, I think that's just got a better way of being. And it was like a deeper musical concept than I had ever experienced. And that was exciting. I loved it, you know? So that's where for me, the turning it on its head, that was certainly all of that, you know?
Sure. Wow.
Yeah. And I just throw in one, I remember sitting with Dave, we were doing some playback in the control room or something, and he stopped and he goes, you know what's great about this? Like, yeah, COVID sucks and everyone's life is ruined, but you know what's great right now is no one can come in and bother us. Like, there was no listening sessions for outside people, or, you know, like you have to do all that. He's like, we have the greatest excuse ever. No one's allowed in. So let's
right.
Right.
Sorry, you can't come in and hear the stuff yet. COVID. Yeah. Wow. Well, I mean, the record's doing awesome so far. The How High is killing it on the radio. I mean, as far as AAA's numbers go. And if you look at the chart, and it's like, you know, Vance Joy and the Foo Fighters are pretty much the only ones ahead of you. And if you look at those, and then you're beating like John Mayer and all these other like huge acts, Milky Chance. I mean, that must feel pretty good.
It's a good feeling for sure. It's not something we expect. You know, again, with this album, I think it's really important that that as an artist, you're accountable for everything you do. And that one thing Sardy would always say is, this is your record. And in the end, it's got to sound the way you want it to sound. It's got to be the way you want it to be. It's got to be something when it goes out the front door, you go, this is us. You can like it. You can love it. You can not like it. It doesn't matter. This is where we're at today. And that's the most important thing. I think there's an authenticity that you got to have to yourselves in those moments. So it's like you expand the sound, you do all this stuff. That's artistic need above anything else. And then if it makes, you know, you go up a chart, or you know, you get a few more people in the room, that's awesome. Those are great results. But if you can't write with that in your heart and head, you know, you can't write with it like, we got to write this song this way because we need to get a bigger audience. That's a totally not the way. I mean, maybe that works for some people, but it's just not the way that we can do it. You know, in the end, we're just students of the game. And we've learned by watching other artists that are like, you know, no matter which way you go, if you do it in your living room, people are going to say, it sounds like you did it in your living room. If you do it in a big studio, some people are going to say, it sounds like you did it in a big studio. You can't worry about any of that crap. You got to just do you. And this album, I am so stoked on this one, man. I mean, I think it's just got a little additional weight because we've had to wait for a year, man. So it's like the idea that this thing's dropping. We've all been sitting on this and had to kind of temper our enthusiasm when it was done and be like, you know, and when it got done, we're like, will we ever be able to tour again? Is the entire industry going to collapse on itself? It was, you know, so the idea of being able to drop the album, go on tour is amazing. And we're stoked. And Dave taught us a whole lot. And, it was time to be third record is the time to break down some walls and take some chances. And we had 2 records plus a rarities album. So we released that. So essentially we have 3 records. So you've got like 36 songs that we did mostly in Alex's living room. It's like Alex was saying, it was time to move on. And, you know, those songs exist. Those recordings are always be there. But if you know, the Beatles, you look at the greatest bands, it's like Beatles did 5, Beatles 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then they all of a sudden there's Rubber Soul. It's a completely different thing. And It's like, you have to evolve. The greats that you model your inspiration after all evolved. And it's like, I think it's a great thing for bands to do that.
I think it's cool that you said that you guys don't like write for, you know, to try to write a song to chart or whatever. That just kind of it happens if you have a good song. And that's been kind of from the very, very beginning. I mean, you said Off the Ground was the last song you guys wrote, and it wasn't even your mind as a single. And they're like, oh yeah, that should be the single. And then that's a song that like really kind of explodes in the very, very beginning for you.
Well, and not to take this over, but I want to say one thing. Our mentality, and Mark, I'm not going to interrupt you, but just so you know where our mentality was at that time. Now, when we get done with a record, we might have more of an opinion when the record is completed, because we have an idea of what the hell is there. We've been on the radio, so it might be like,
Right.
But that's when it's completed. It's a big difference, not while you're doing it.
While you're writing.
But with Off the Ground, this is how naive we were to the whole thing. We're like, we based our song, like what songs were working the best was how an audience that never heard it reacted, because we were an opening band. We were, so it was like, well, that one doesn't really smoke live. So I don't know. Can that be a single,
Right.
But we didn't, I just remember that, I'm sorry, Mark, I cut you off there, bud.
No, I mean, actually it's funny. That's what I was going to say. It was interesting to see. We were in Europe on a support gig over there, and we were playing Off the Ground, like, I think like early in the set, or maybe we were opening with it or something. And we're just kind of like, I mean, people seemed to dig it. It wasn't like the place was going bananas or whatever. And then to see the shift of like, oh, once people got to know that song, now we play it and everyone's, like singing along and everything. You're like, oh, that's how that works. So, but we had no idea, because we never had a band that had a song that anybody knew, like,
right.
It's a weird ass thing when you're like playing. We have the song Rita Mae Young, which is like, I would say like a fan favorite or whatever. And I just remember the three of us sitting in Alex's living room writing verses for that. And all of a sudden you're out playing and there's just people singing that. And that's still a pretty weird thing, and like, it's awesome, but it's not normal. You know what I mean? Like other jobs or whatever, but.
That's really cool. And I appreciate your guys' time. Thank you so much for doing this. This has been awesome. I have one more question. I want to know if you have any advice for aspiring artists.
Who wants to start that one? I'll be glad to, but I'm always the first one to go.
I would say if there was 2 points, when we started out, when we kind of already had those failed bands experiences, there was kind of 2 things that we kind of stuck with us, just on a more nuts and bolts level. We said, whatever we do not make a full length album unless you feel like there's an audience that wants a full length album. And I mean, I just moved this week and I have full length CDs, Alex Stiff CDs, they're not really albums. They're just burned CDs that you have them in drawers, or, me and Mark's band is kind of the same thing. So it was like, so just let's keep making EPs, keep getting interest. There's nothing more depressing than putting out a full length record that you're calling the full length record. And then there's like a couple comments on cdbaby.com, like
sure.
And then it's over and it's done. And another thing was, with the touring, we found cool ways to play shows locally. Whereas in the past, it was like, I think I can get us a gig up in San Francisco. And then from there, I can get us a gig up in Portland. But you don't have anybody to come see you in those places. So what you end up doing is putting debt on your credit card. And, that these are just like, when you ask for like advice, this was stuff that we had come in already charged on the new band, the record company, of stuff like kind of not to do. So that was, just on a nuts and bolts level, I'll just put that out. But I'm sure Chris has a more like philosophical advice thing. But those were 2 things early on for us that were, build locally. You have no reason to go outside 300 miles unless there's a demand for you 300 miles away.
I love that.
No, that's exactly it. I would just throw in too that when you're starting, whether it's like in a band setting or you're a solo artist or whatever you're doing, I think it's important to figure out what the word success means to you. And because it's going to mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. If you're waiting in line at an American Idol audition, I think your definition of success is different than, say, a band in a garage, starting out and practicing. And one isn't better or worse than the other. It's just different. I think it's important to know, okay, what are you doing this for? Is it purely a love of music? That's great. Do you want to make a living at this? That's a whole other thing. And then within that, what are the parameters of considering that it's working, that it's successful? Is it just being able to pay your rent, or is it, are you seeking adoration from strangers, or whatever the thing is? It's important to kind of have a basic understanding of why you're doing this in the first place.
I love it.
I would add to any young artist. Yes, you're right, Alex. We know each other very well. I'm gonna go philosophical. I would say
thanks for having us.
Yeah, he's forgotten all about how much greatness I bring to his life with my wonderful philosophies. No, I'm just kidding. Here it is. You know, if you're starting out, there's a couple real quick things. And I'm talking more inside of your head and your heart. One, be proud of what you love, what you listen to. Don't worry if you love pop music and that's what you're into. Don't, when you're in a conversation, BS and say, oh yeah, I don't listen to that, because you know you might be around a group of people who might go, I hate that. It's like, be who you are. From stem to stern, start to finish. Be yourself. Find yourself. Find who you are in your heart and stand behind it and stay open. Don't fall in love with yourself. If you're a good singer, don't think just because you're singing something that, oh, I'm singing a song now. It's like, have a little bit of a understanding of what the process is, and listen with a loving intent of making it better. And the other thing I'd say is, it's not all about you in the end. If you want to be in a collaborative group of people, you have to make space to understand who they are as individuals, who you are, what respect is, how to respect them, and how to be respected yourself, or you're gonna freaking tank. And the other thing I'll say is, you're gonna go through the hard times first, and just remember, you probably love the people around you a lot closer to the way you did the first day you met them than how you feel when things are tanking and not feeling very good, because that's frustrating. Nothing fixes relationships like succeeding at something. And I can tell you, in our band, you know, when we're beating our heads against the wall still to this day, we all have to step back and go, hey, let's not get frustrated with each other here. We're all in this together. Let's figure it out, you know? So love the people you're with, and be understanding, and be accountable to how much you bring to the table, but also don't think you're so perfect that you can't, you know, if you're going to judge someone else, you got to know that that's going to come back the other way, and you have to accept it. So be honest and be a good person, and write from your frickin' heart, as I was told so long ago. Bringing it backward.